Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome you all to the Halftime Talk feature interview series, and I'm delighted today to be joined by His Excellency Khamis Juma Buamim, who is Chairman of the Dubai Council for Marine and Maritime Industries and Chairman and Group CEO of KB Investments here in the UAE. Your Excellency, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
It's my pleasure, and this is a great opportunity, and thank you for your cordial invitation.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Well, let's start by talking about what's in front of us today, isn't it, in terms of the macro picture for the region, for logistics, for maritime and marine, especially which is the geopolitical situation, which by all intents and purposes right now in the Gulf, in the Red Sea, in the region here is calm. We've obviously seen certain events happening the last few months, but everything's flowing, let's say, and everything's being loaded as far as we know. But, what have been in the last 6 months, in your opinion, the sort of consequences from a cost point of view, from a forward planning point of view of this uncertainty that still exists?
Well, as you would imagine, there are a number of unfortunate issues that occurred at a time or another. We've been through this before. So it's been quite dramatic. Our real problem always and forever, when you're talking about the Middle East geopolitical tension, or for that matter, many of the issues that we face from time to time, is really nothing. It's nothing when you compare it with the factual difficulties that we're facing with the geoeconomic and fragmentation that's happening around the globe at this time. So trade, as always, had many tensions and many unforgettable and wanted derailers. One of the derailers, of course, the recent situation in our region. Prior to that, there was many of other consequences or derailers, and we believe these are time derailers. They're not long-lasting. They, in some cases, we believe they overestimated how will it affect the global trade and mobility, or for that matter, shipping. But nevertheless, we've seen, many countries also impacting positively when it gives them opportunity to have bilateral economic agreements. And this is quite a phenomena happening, it's been happening for quite a while. The main reason for that, I think, is the geoeconomic fragmentation process which happened. As we speak, we are seeing more and more mitigation to the issues that's happening. And we are seeing also quite an interesting flow of new dynamics. Take, for that matter, the train from Oman to UAE, and UAE to Oman, UAE to the rest of the GCC countries. So transportation will happen by sea or by land, and therefore it's actually an ongoing process. And I believe, the UAE has been always at the forefront of reducing, as we call it, when you look at the trade restriction, and we always paid a lot of importance to the infrastructure investment, and of course enhancing regulations. And these are part of the evolution of trade, of economy, and also creating added value for the future.
Okay, thank you, Excellency. And I mean, as you mentioned quite a few times there, the changing dynamics in trade. I mean, we have the immediate geopolitical rerouting, that's temporary. As you said, it's nothing new to this particular, the shipping industry, maritime industry is very, very resolute in handling such things historically. But we are seeing new economic trade blocks forming. We're seeing globalization take a bit of a shift, and obviously how geopolitics will play into bilateral trade. Without getting too much into that, but let's look at the UAE. As you said, it's always been there to circumvent and help with things like having to reroute trade. But how important, let's look at the UAE economy and look at it as a maritime power, if you like. How important is your sector in shaping the future of the UAE economy? What are the future growth targets that you see that you have not achieved yet, geographically speaking, for example? Where do you see the new opportunities?
I think, in many cases, you'll find most of, not all, now talking about the new dynamics. The new dynamics in the maritime and energy industry basically is clustering process. We are seeing more and more ideas of building clusters to ensure integration and synergies. And this comes into whether in a regional level or a multifaceted international level. And we've seen also the UAE is quite a dynamic player. UAE has always been at the forefront of change and transformation for the economy to grow, for the economy to sustain. And also, frankly speaking, we are quite unique when it comes to the UAE, because we have two parts of the Red Sea. When we look at the Arabian Sea or the Arab Arabian Sea and the Arabian Gulf, you have Gulf of Oman, you have the Indian Ocean. So we are in a faster, better structured for global trade. And therefore, I think sooner or later you'll find these clusters built around the UAE will create an added value. And we believe the whole world now, we are enhancing these kind of thought processes, and we are working on these kind of shift from a normal, working process to a clustering process.
And tell me, Your Excellency, how much is technology is always part of manufacturing, it's part of operations, part of logistics. We have the whole new AI conversation, which is going to be leading to efficiencies, etc. How critical is that at this point in time, the speed that we're seeing in the offerings to logistics on that front?
It's always been there. It's always been there. The fact is, technology as a whole, whether be it AI or softwares or systems, existed in different environments. Of course, the UAE, for that matter, Middle East in general, in fact, is being forthcoming with these capabilities and all this. And we've seen also the most important driver on all of this is eliminating the paperwork around supply chain processes, because IT played the biggest advantage of interconnectivity by modem rather than paper exchange or notification. And this grown now to the AI, where remote access is happening. Actually, AI is helping in across the board, which include whether in the data sector or data side, or even the blockchain side. And this will help to increase the potential of our ports, our cities, our supply chain, our logistics, shipping in general. When it comes to in general, they will add more value. And hopefully that also will help to sustain the future for our industry. So we are using it in that measure or that concept.
I mean, those two words, supply and chain, have been always there. But of course, since COVID, post-COVID, you've got the geopolitical disruption. It's a whole new focus, isn't there? Not just from the technology side and efficiencies, but the vulnerability of supply chain, the nearshoring conversation that everyone's having, the onshoring, etc., that countries are now. What, from a maritime point of view, what impact are you feeling, if at all, from some countries becoming more protectionist in that way of trying to keep their reliance, if you like, closer to home? How is that going to impact, do you think, the maritime industry?
I think we've seen it quite a bit. There has been a lot of inner regulation in certain countries, in certain even environment. Take the EU for that matter. Take some countries in the Far East, or for that matter, even America or the USA. These are things happen from time to time for different reasons. As it happens also, it creates the value adding for other countries to look into ways of mitigation. And in my view, we've seen this happening a number of times during crisis, financial crisis, during wars, or during global tension. But as I said, the biggest problem we have is we have a fragmentation that's happened in the past few years. And this fragmentation in the trade, be it or in the supply chain, or even be it in the logistic structure, is being, a cost associated with that. But I think we are like many people. We believe that we had the first shift, which is west to east, and now we are coming to the second shift, which will be north to south. And this is quite an important shift because it's targeting energy side and the raw material of earth, which is minerals. And of course, the best places for that is the GCC, MENA region, Africa. These are interconnected. And this is where the mammoth growth will happen. The reality of the matter, the real growth will happen within these structures. And we are seeing more and more of these dynamics playing at this moment, where many of the African countries started moving with the economy, trying to restructure themselves, trying to have a major change. So it enhances its own country growth, and vice versa. Even in the GCC or the MENA region, we are seeing a lot of rethinking of certain things, but developing faster or developing at a stage out process. And this all part of the interconnectivity, because we are lucky because we sit between west to east trade cycle, and this is important for us. This is why when you look at our region, it's a massive, requirement that we keep the flow of trade and we keep the flow of economic dynamics and create the added value for ourselves and for the global market, of course.
Yeah, I mean, you really are at the heart of all that, aren't you? The east to west and the north to south. And of course, the UAE has a history of maritime expertise, doesn't it? I mean, it's not just today and the dynamics and you happen to be well placed. You have that historical expertise. And you mentioned Africa, of course, a big new area of investment for the GCC in general, whether it's through logistics or any other sector. What about, we're always talking about knowledge transfer and expertise. I mean, in your partnerships that you look to make in Africa, or the investments that you look to do there, is there an element of that where you're going to be, let's say, exporting your best practices with any of your future partners? Is that needed? How important is that, do you think, to future investment?
It's the most critical part. We are a believer that, knowledge sharing, the best practices, transformation processes, and all this. We are a little bit different because we believe in the holistic approach concept, and we try in as much as we can to create value adding to all parties. So the success of Africa will come, part of it is being on the mode of transformation, which is happening. And we are, of course, always been there looking into opportunities, how we can support that transformation, and how we can create the added value for the in-country processes rather than external. And I think the most important thing when you look at the history of for that matter, of Dubai or the UAE in general, from history, from the era of the Dow, we always worked with in the trade sector, you could see it, they worked with subcontinent, East Africa, and the Arabian Gulf. And this is historical. So the interconnectivity exists. The question is, can we enhance it? Can we create an added value to it? I like the word you used about exchanging knowledge and all of this, because it's great. Because if you want to grow mobility and interconnectivity, you have to really share your practices and the best practices of yours, and also enhance the technology. And we believe that will be the most important thing, especially for Africa. It needs, yes, it needs energy, it needs infrastructure, but it needs really, the technology that create value and make it last longer and better.
Absolutely. And Your Excellency, what about, I mean, as you said, knowledge sharing specifically to those continents and countries that require it internally. What about competition? Let's talk about competition within this hub of a region that you said is naturally placed to be a logistics maritime center. Clearly, the UAE is perfectly placed. Saudi Arabia has a coastline, Oman, India. Is competition a good thing? Is it a little bit of a short-term threat, do you think, a challenge? Or how does that all come together in terms of maritime competition?
I think competition always and forever will be the best thing happens to the industry itself, because it creates a different value processes. Of course, fair competition always welcomed. I think we need more and more fair competition, because then we'll have better services. We will be having a sustainable industry as a whole. Cost, of course, will be important, because in the end of the day, the end user pays the cost. So competition, it depends how you look at it. And now what we do not need to do is to compete, for the sake of just competition. I need this and I need that. The question is, collaboration is a must. This is why we're talking about always about the maritime cluster, because energy is required. The future is actually going that route. Now, if we jump the wagon and we move ahead with them with that kind of concept, which is the future, I think we will be at the forefront of everything. No doubt, there is regional competition and there is international or global competition. In general, I think we are seeing a lot of the surrounding region. They are more now looking inner rather than global. And for different reasons. And I must admit, in some cases, they are absolutely correct. Because integration of economies between regions does not have to be compliant with certain regulation international. Could be between two countries only. And the UAE has been at the forefront, where we, thank God, we signed a number of agreements with different countries where we can still interact away from potential restriction or ambiguous deals that may happen. But in general, I can assure you that what you are seeing of the transformation which is happening, whether in the port side, the logistic, intercommunication side, which is the technology part of it also, and for that matter is the mobility, is quite significant and will keep going and going. It will not stop.
Yeah, and Your Excellency, one major area of change now and going forward, of course, is sustainable. You mentioned the word sustainable at the beginning there of your last answer, but in a different context. I want to just talk about, as we close up, sustainable fuels, because of course that impacts the shipping sector, the bunkering sector, of which is a very big component of what the Fujairah offering, for example, is in the UAE. This is not new. We've had progress in sustainable fuels. There's different countries moving at different paces to offer that. So how important is that as a priority for the UAE in terms of kind of stay ahead on that front in terms of offering? What impacts is that going to have on investments in infrastructure and shipping, changing shipping, I suppose, requirements? And of course, regulation falls into that, doesn't it, as well?
Yes. As always, you know, regulation sometimes could become a positive contributor or negative. Unfortunately, I'm a believer that the more you regulate, the more you eliminate. And I hope that regulation becomes a support of a process rather than targeted processes, which we have. You know, everybody's targeting X, Y, Z. But delivering that, it may not happen in a timely manner that within this framework. UAE has been quite fluid, very forthcoming with ideas with regard to the fuels. You know, we have different fuels than we used to have. Of course, the UAE as a general and as a whole is looking into you know, minimizing emission of carbon or that any type of gases, and also eliminating as much as we can, you know, any potential widespread unwanted, let's say, materials that may destroy the environment or may have an effect on the environment. The fuels in general, you mentioned Fujairah, there are many ways that the shipping industry is undertaken, whether going to lower carbon fuel processes or actually using certain other measure where they capture and you reduce emission. There is also the concept of slow speed processes happening a lot where ships are minimizing emission in that manner. So the fuel of the future is still not there, but we are progressing towards potential. The question, will that eliminate anything? In my book, no. The oil will still remain the main source of energy wherever you look at it for the coming years, to be even to the 50s. And therefore, we have to live with how change can dramatically create value. I think technology will be part of that, you know, and we are seeing more and more advances in the systems and technology where they can reduce, you know, fuel consumption and other things.
Your Excellency Khamis Buamim, thank you so much for joining us today on Halftime Talk. It's been great to get your insights on the marine and maritime industry.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.